In the cold waters of the North Pacific, a high-stakes game of World War II naval warfare was about to unfold. By March 1943, America was preparing to reclaim the Alaskan islands of Attu and Kiska, seized by the Japanese the previous year. The mission of the U.S. Navy was to intercept and destroy Japanese resupply convoys. But on March 26, Rear Admiral Charles H. McMorris, leading a small task group, encountered far more than expected. A formidable Japanese force escorted by 8 warships, including 2 heavy cruisers and 2 light cruisers, was advancing. The Americans, led by the heavy cruiser Salt Lake City and the light cruiser Richmond, were clearly outmatched, yet they engaged with determination. Salt Lake City drew first blood against the Japanese cruiser Nachi, which was battered and close to destruction. As the battle raged, the Japanese made an unexpected move, one that is still debated. In June 1942, Japanese forces had landed on the western Aleutian islands of Kiska and Attu as part of their larger plan to attack Midway. After suffering a decisive defeat at Midway, they decided to hold on to these remote islands as a defensive shield against possible American counterattacks toward the Kurils. As the United States prepared to retake these strongholds, American submarines and aircraft harassed Japanese convoys. In response, the Japanese Navy shifted to sailing at night or in bad weather to protect their supply routes. Knowing this, Admiral Thomas Kinkaid deployed a surface force around Attu to further disrupt shipping. On the night of February 19, 1943, the patrol force, including the heavy cruiser Indianapolis and the destroyers Coghlan and Gillespie, shelled and sank the Japanese transport Akagane Maru west of Attu. This blockade prompted Vice Admiral Boshirō Hosogaya, commander of the 5th Fleet in the Northern Theater, to assemble a fast convoy of 2 merchant ships, Asaka Maru and Sakito Maru, along with a slower transport, Sanko Maru. They carried vital supplies and equipment needed to complete an all-weather airstrip on Attu, but the Americans intercepted a secret message revealing the convoy's mission. A plan was quickly devised to intercept it. Rear Admiral McMorris was tasked with the operation, commanding 1 heavy cruiser, 1 light cruiser, and 4 destroyers. On paper, it seemed simple, but the situation quickly grew more complex. McMorris single quotes his force included the light cruiser Richmond under Captain Theodore Wald, and the destroyers Bailey, Coghlan, Dale, and Monaghan commanded by Captain Ralph Riggs. Recently, the heavy cruiser Salt Lake City, captained by Bertram Rogers, had rejoined the group after repairs. On March 26, just before sunrise, the task group was about 180 miles west of Attu and 100 miles south of the Komandorski Islands, spread out in a scouting line and zigzagging at 15 knots. The ship scanned the calm but freezing seas with excellent visibility. During breakfast, both the destroyer Coghlan and the flagship Richmond detected radar contacts. 5 vessels, roughly 7 to 12 miles north. McMorris ordered his ships to prepare for action. As daylight increased, more ships came into view, transports with cruiser and destroyer escorts. Confident it would be a straightforward engagement, McMorris described it as potentially a Roman holiday cruise. Readied their guns. Prisoners were released from the brig, cooks prepared coffee, and men sliced bread for sandwiches, expecting a short battle. But the challenge ahead would be far greater than they imagined. The Japanese squadron, sailing without radar, had a different advantage. Their highly trained lookouts, selected for exceptional eyesight. They spotted the American fleet half an hour before the Americans saw them. The southern horizon brightened earlier than the north, further aiding Japanese detection. This encounter was extraordinary. Both fleets were isolated, with no aircraft or submarines nearby. The battle would be fought solely by surface ships, one of the rare last gunnery duels in naval history. Around 8 a.m., roughly 100 nautical miles south of the Komandorskis and 180 miles west of Attu, McMorris suddenly realized he was facing Hosogaya's entire fleet, escorting reinforcements. Outnumbered more than 2 to 1, he had to make a quick decision. He chose a bold strategy, to engage the Japanese with long-range gunfire while trying to break through to the transports. A plea for air support was sent to the USAAF base at Adak, reaching a squadron of B-24s, which took off immediately. But the heavy fog proved impossible to overcome. The pilots became disoriented and had to turn back, leaving the naval force to fight alone. McMorris coordinated closely with Captain Rogers of the Salt Lake City, known to its crew as Swayback Maru for its curved deck. The Richmond would follow the heavier cruiser's maneuvers. The Americans did not launch spotting planes to conserve resources, while the Japanese launched one, though it proved ineffective under heavy fire and poor communication. At a distance of 20,000 yards. The Japanese opened fire, surprising the Americans. Their heavy cruisers concentrated on Salt Lake City, but she retaliated with accurate fire, striking Nachi. Still, the American attempt to close in on the transports was frustrated as the Japanese shifted course and drew the battle into closer quarters, forcing McMorris to maneuver defensive. Healthy battle raged with fierce exchanges of fire between Salt Lake City and the Japanese cruiser Maya. Both ships maneuvered skillfully, locked in a duel that lasted 3.5 hours. Despite taking damage, Captain Rogers remained composed and confident. The American destroyers held their fire at long range, while Japanese destroyers and the light cruiser Abukuma prepared cautiously for a torpedo attack. The cruiser Tama tried to slow the American advance but eventually retreated. The fight grew more intense, and Maya landed a damaging hit on Salt Lake City amidships, causing casualties and starting a fire. At the same time, the cruiser Nachi was slowed by a devastating hit from an American destroyer. Both sides paused their fire briefly, and Captain McMorris believed the enemy cruiser had been disabled. So he changed course to go after the transports. But Nachi and Maya, supported by 4 destroyers, resumed pursuit, forcing the Americans into a zigzagging chase. Although the Japanese ships were faster, their zigzagging slowed them down, and Hosogaya focused his attacks on Salt Lake City while minimizing risk to his own fleet. Captain Rogers spotted Tama in a position where she could direct fire for Nachi and Maya, so he sought permission to attack. Salt Lake City fired several salvos, driving Tama into evasive maneuvers. At the same time, a dispatch arrived from Admiral Kincaid suggesting withdrawal, but the decision was made to fight on. Shortly after 10 a.m., Salt Lake City's steering gear malfunctioned, a recurring issue from earlier, but the crew managed to improvise a solution. She kept firing, but Nachi and Maya closed in, raising alarm among the crew. With their plan to strike the transports abandoned, the Americans focused on survival. Captain Rogers requested a smokescreen for cover, which McMorris approved. The destroyers laid down an effective screen, and the ships turned to the southwest, using the cover to break contact. The accuracy of Japanese gunnery led the Americans to believe their opponents might be equipped with fire control radar. As the Americans raced westward, pursued by the enemy, they found themselves over 500 miles from Adak, and much closer to the Japanese base at Paramushiro. McMorris made the daring decision to turn south, and the smokescreen confused Nachi and Maya long enough for the Americans to gain distance. The Japanese fired torpedoes, but none hit their targets. Salt Lake City was in grave danger. She had already taken 3 hits when another shell struck, causing flooding in critical compartments. Her crew fought with remarkable courage and determination. Damage control teams worked in waist-deep icy water mixed with oil, even using their shirts to plug leaks in the ship's skin. Although the flooding gave her a heavy list to port, the cruiser kept firing and running at full speed. But when her after-fire room was knocked out, her speed dropped to 20 knots. McMorris ordered a torpedo attack by 3 destroyers, but it was cancelled when Salt Lake City regained some speed. Then disaster struck again, as seawater contaminated her fuel, extinguishing burners, dropping steam pressure, and shutting down her main engines. Salt Lake City drifted helplessly as Maya and Nachi closed in, with Japanese destroyers preparing torpedo runs. In desperation, Captain Rogers requested authorization for a torpedo strike, which was granted. Then, unexpectedly, the Japanese column changed course and withdrew. Several factors influenced Hosogaya's decision: low fuel, depleted ammunition, the poor performance of his destroyers, and uncertainty caused by Salt Lake City's splashes, which looked like aerial bombs. American bombers were also expected in the area, adding to his concerns. Toward the end of the fight, an American destroyer managed to score a hit on the flagship Nachi, further shaking Japanese confidence. With this stroke of luck and the crew's determination, Salt Lake City was spared from what had seemed certain destruction. The destroyers, Bailey Coghlan and Monaghan, charged against Nachi and Maya, enduring heavy bombardment. Lieutenant Commander Atkinson of Bailey skillfully dodged shells, and though Bailey was struck and lost all electrical power, she still launched torpedoes before withdrawing with the others. Salt Lake City also recovered quickly. Within just 4 minutes, her crew had repaired the engines and restored speed. At last, the Japanese disappeared from sight, ending one of the most dramatic naval battles of the Pacific War. Though no ships were sunk and total casualties numbered fewer than 60, the strategic outcome was decisive. The Japanese convoy had been forced to retreat and could no longer use the northern supply route to the Aleutian. From then on, their garrisons could be supplied only by submarine, which was far too limited to meet their needs. The Battle of the Komandorski Islands is little remembered today, but its impact was significant. It showed how even a seemingly small clash could shape the outcome of a larger campaign. By denying the Japanese their supply lines, the Americans gained a crucial advantage in the Aleutians, and what might have been a forgotten fight became a quiet but vital triumph for the U.S. Navy. Asterisk.